Well, hello there. Thank you for tuning in to episode 6 of Kids Health with Lawrence August.
Hey,
Last week, hi, how are you, Lawrence?
good.
Nice to see you. Last week, we dove into dental health, and we thought it was best to jump into some subcategories of dental health because your dental health is imperative to your well-being and your overall health. So today's subject is mouth breathing, and I'm really excited to dive into this. Hello, Lawrence. What you got?
Hello. Well, what do I got? I got a beard.
Yeah, you do.
I
Look at how
brought
fast.
I brought the snowy California beard for today. This is actually not real. This is what they call a face wig.
No, it's
No,
not
I'm
you.
joking. I'm joking.
Oh.
I'm joking. I'm a grown man, Heidi. Yeah, this is gonna be great. I'm really glad we did this. Last episode like you said, we touched on the overall dental health, kind of general stuff. Nutrition, hygiene. We talked a little bit about mouth breathing, but today is going to be the deep dive, which I'm super stoked about. I want to ask you, which are maybe your own experiences on this before we start. Just kind of curious if you have any background in this and what are your thoughts on mouth breathing?
Oh my gosh. It was only just the last 2 years, really, that I connected the dots to my mouth breathing as a child. And I just thought everyone breathed that way. I could see pictures of me like everywhere and at night. And sure enough, turns out to be late in life now, I have advanced periodontal disease. And there's a couple things I do to combat that. However, I've linked it to the mouth breathing at night. And my son does it too. And what I found worked for me is the mouth bit, because at night it just literally pulls my jaw forward and it opens it all up. And I'm like, my mouth is closed. But by having something in my mouth, it was just the craziest thing. And it's all lined up. And I actually, for the first night I wore my mouth bit, I slept deeper than I've ever slept. Ever.
Incredible. So this is timely then. This episode.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you said that. And I was like, oh, I got stories for that.
Yeah, I'm just always curious. It's astonishing to me how little it's talked about. I mean, most people are like, okay, breathing, the term mouth breather, you hear that a lot of times. It's used, kind of in a derogatory way, look at this mouth breather. And, so we sort of have these connotations of that word, but it's astonishing how little this is talked about. And especially at the early ages, when it's actually, really critical. For myself, when I was young, I was a mouth breather, and I do recall trips to the doctor when I was a little boy. Oh, he's got enlarged adenoids. They wanted to take them out. That never happened. But had, I think, my parents been given that information, with the proper level of care, I think a lot of things could have been different in my own, development, even like with my face. So we were talking a little bit before the show about how even in my adult years, though, I've managed to actually restructure my face a bit through proper breathing. And as an adult, I really started to get into breathing when I was introduced to yoga. So this was back in 2012, where Kundalini yoga, you're doing breath of fire and alternate nose breathing. And it got me interested in the subject. And so, I think a lot of us know about breathing exercises or little, stress relief tips. But what we really need to talk about, we're going to talk about today, is the default breathing pattern, right? Are you a nose breather or are you a mouth breather in general? And this matters because this is the kind of breathing we're doing round the clock.
Yeah.
So,
and it's timely because even when you were just talking, I was checking in, and I find I take in more breath when my mouth is open. So to me, that means something's going on in here. And I just feel like the simple facial structure or I'm curious.
Well, you will learn a lot today about that phenomenon of that feeling of not getting enough air versus what the reality really is behind the scenes. So I think it's a fascinating topic, and I'm ready to go.
Cool.
We can roll it. So let's go to our opening slide.
Woohoo!
Heidi in the control room. Yes. Okay. So here he is. For those of you old enough, you all know who this is. I think the parents that I'm speaking to in the crowd is just kind of like the perfect character that really an iconic figure here, Napoleon Dynamite, kind of a very good visual representation of your classic mouth breather. Oh gosh, idiot. Oh gosh. So let's dive in. How big of an issue is this? And so 55%. Okay, so we're not talking like, just a small amount of children. This is more than half. This is an estimate, right? Nearly 55% of children are affected by, open mouth breathing and, the consequences from that. And some general snapshot characteristics of just sort of what we would say is mouth breathing versus nasal breathing. Mouth breathing, you'll often see improper posture. There's often a blocked airway. The tongue is not on the roof of the mouth. Everything's kind of dropped down because that tongue is not on the roof of the mouth. And we're going to get into some super detail on all this in later slides, but just a general snapshot here. And then you'll find that the jawline, there's a recessed jawline and chin versus nasal. Exactly what you said at the start there, Heidi. Wow. Versus nasal breathing. Usually there's proper posture. We have a functioning airway. The tongue is sitting comfortably on the roof of the mouth. And we know if the tongue's on the roof of the mouth, you're not going to be breathing through your mouth. Lips are sealed. And through the developmental stages, this actually really helps to define the jawline and chin. So right out the gate, what symptoms? There's more, but I'd say these are the key symptoms of mouth breathing, right? Mm-hmm. Some telltale. Snoring, right? The mouth is open during sleep. Noisy eating.
That's my son.
This is something I've been called out on this.
Yeah, I remember.
Heidi was my first roommate when I moved to LA, everybody. And so there you go. I mean, if mid-20s Lawrence knew better, he probably would have shut his mouth while he was eating.
I always thought you were just teasing me, like trying to drive me crazy.
Wow. See that, folks? Man, the things you learn 20-something years later. Difficulty speaking. We'll get into that. Speech development, bad breath, cavities, tooth decay, sinus infections, enlarged tonsils, adenoids, dry mouth, cracked lips. This kind of persistent, this open mouth look. You see this picture of this girl here, or the Napoleon Dynamite look. Concentration at school. So here we've got, ADD, ADHD, all these things. Might be just a mouth breathing issue. Complaints about brain fog, irritability, tiredness, and get dark circles under the eyes, which would, indicate poor sleep.
Yeah.
So some of the effects of, mouth breathing, here's the sort of profile. We could see the flattened nose.
This is my son.
Lip,
oh my God.
Right? We see this forward head posture. So facial growth and open mouth, it kind of encourages these negative growth patterns, flatter features, the droopy eyes, lower jaw, posture, right? So this is fascinating stuff. Posture is just so interesting to me, body mechanics, the way it works from top to bottom and bottom up. I mean, even the feet can affect upward and vice versa. But when that tongue is sitting at the roof of the mouth, that kind of seals off the oral cavity, and that kind of holds the throat open like a tent, right? And these are actually the muscles that support the neck and hold the posture straight. Fascinating stuff with posture. Speech, right? So difficulty, especially with like the S sounds, right? Because you have this what's called a tongue thrust swallowing pattern, right? That kind of forward. When you see that, swallowing should be very relaxed. Shouldn't be jutting your head forward. So these are things to look for. Sleep and oxygen. So, when we're talking about like sleep, things like sleep apnea, which we're going to go into greater detail later, but these low oxygen levels are going to affect learning, focus. And then for later on, children that have, braces, right? So, okay, put the braces on, fix their teeth, right? The mouth breathing caused the problems with the teeth, you put the braces on. But if you aren't addressing the problem with the open mouth, You have a longer treatment time. It's difficult to close the gaps. The alignment's unstable. You could get a relapse, right? We know people that have retainers or braces, they get them off, and then their teeth start to go crooked again. Well, maybe we have to fix the root of the problem.
Wow.
And here's how we look a little bit more on
Yes.
posture, right? So this is just fascinating stuff. So we see that nasal breathing, the cervical spine support, the width of the palate, right? You see slouching, this narrow high palate. So the neck posture is really dependent on breathing, or you could say also vice versa, right? If you're kind of a little more mindful of the posture, you might breathe better. It's all sort of a loop. And here's a great look at it. Here is this is a great shot, I think, for everybody. If you could imagine, the tongue essentially sets the mold. Okay, so when respiratory function is normal, the mouth remains closed. The tongue is resting in contact with the roof of the mouth. Okay, now when the tongue is pushing up, it's also kind of pushing out. That lateral force that starts to assist the shape of the jaw. So the teeth start to erupt around the tongue. What happens when the tongue is sitting on the bottom of the mouth, everything kind of collapses down, and you can see how narrow the roof of the mouth becomes, and also how deep upward. So what's actually happening is jutting up. Now what's happening below is happening upward. So as this gets narrow and it pushes up, it's actually pushing up into the sinus cavity and making it harder to breathe.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So we're not just thinking about, okay, crowded teeth, crowded mouth, but this is also affecting what's upstairs. It's top to bottom structural problem right there. So, I mean, this is huge. So you could imagine and what's funny is because growing up, I was a mouth breather. It's like, I'd bite my tongue a lot. I mean, for people out there, for like, your kids are like biting their tongue. I mean, even now, oh, my tongue is just too big. Really? I mean, really, like, the chances are is that this was happening and the tongue wasn't allowed to set the mold right for the teeth.
Okay. Are you going to be, here we go. Cause I was going to say this might lead into tongue ties too. Tongue ties and lip ties.
We're hitting all of it today.
My kids, both of them. And
all of it today.
This is resonating already because we had issues with this okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And so like, just to kind of walk this through from the very earliest stages, right? When we look at bottle feeding versus breastfeeding, and just looking at the research, do breastfed children have a lower chance of developing mouth breathing? They did a little bit of a review here. And it turns out this is what they're finding. If we look here at the results of this particular study, the likelihood of developing mouth breathing was 41% and 34% lower among children that were breastfed for more than 12 and more than 24 months, respectively. Now, the conclusions of it, they don't have a lot of studies, but they are recommending breastfeeding should be encouraged due to its possible protective effect, evidenced by a substantial reduction in the prevalence of mouth breathing pattern when performed for up to 2 years. We'll go to another quick study, the consequences of bottle feeding to orophacial development, right? Another one you guys can screenshot and look at it yourself. I like to cite my sources with these things. And they concluded that the use of the bottle, even among breastfed children, interferes negatively with orophacial development. Now, Heidi, I earlier provided you with a link. There's a company, this is really interesting, great timing. I think this is worth checking out. I'm always going to be in favor of breastfeeding if all possible, for obviously these benefits and the nutrition benefits and development. I mean, you really can't beat it. Mm-hmm. Breast is best, but we want to be able to feed. And this company, Emulate, they're brand new, so you can get on a waiting list. So this might help some people out there, and I definitely encourage to share. It looks very interesting. Essentially, they make replica bottles based off of your own breast.
That's amazing.
And a great idea. Why didn't anybody think of it sooner? So this is something I think going to be of high value for those moms that just quite simply, it's not tenable.
Oh my God.
And if we,
can I share my
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah,
Share
please,
quickly
please.
my little stories.
Yeah.
Both my kids. It just the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. But I had horrible PTSD with both births,
No, I'm
and
sorry.
my daughter wound up having lip ties that I didn't know about. They were never told to me or never assessed. So she had trouble latching. So we did breast and bottle, whatever I could do just to feed her for that first year. Very much new mom. By the time my son was born, he had such a bad tongue tie that they released me from hospital. No one told me anything, and he wouldn't latch. He was getting jaundice. He was getting weak. So I pumped for 2 hours for 15 months, every hour for 2 hours. I can't hear that Apple alarm at all, or I trigger
Oh
because
wow.
I was a zombie because I'm like, he's getting my milk. But even the bottle, he could never get hungry enough. And then come to find out, he's now 9. We have mouth issues, mouth breathing, DK, the lisp, the voice, speech problems, all of these problems. And I basically had such bad postpartum, I did not seek help. I didn't leave for like a year.
Sure.
But anyway,
Sure.
it was all, yes, I just felt like if only the right teams were in place to
Wow.
show,
Yeah.
hey,
You
this lip tie,
you
tongue
speak
tie.
from like this is the perfect
Yeah.
scenario, and I'm not saying
I
that
wish I had those
as a in
bottles.
a good way, but
Oh,
a classic example of what could go wrong from just
yeah.
not catching something like a lip tie or a tongue tie early on,
Which could have
or
been fixed
not
right away. Yeah.
knowing some of this information and being able to check in on this. So wow, Heidi, sorry you had to go through that.
Oh, yeah. No,
Um,
I was a mess.
and when we look here, so why? Like, what are the reasons why, right? Well, breastfeeding provides the exercise to both sides of the baby's face, head, and body. So actually, when you're alternating sides, that's kind of nature's way to kind of provide different angles and development. It's
Yeah.
fascinating stuff when you
It
really
really is.
look further into it. And that's going to lead to improvement in development of face, jaw, dental arches, palates, teeth, speech, all the stuff you just said. Um,
That's it.
the bottle feeding, hopefully this company is going to solve a lot of those issues, but with the undeveloped jaws and the orthodontic
Oh
problems.
my gosh, it could save so many issues. This
And
is like mind blowing.
it's a suck, swallow, breath synchronization, right? So everything kind of moves together as a unified organ. So fascinating natures. There's a difference sort of early on. It's like a suckling. The tongue is kind of curling toward, right? Because they have to kind of draw that milk, and then it goes into sucking,
Mhm.
where the tongue is actually kind of moving more upward. And if we look also, this kind of could touch on it. I don't have a slide on it, but things like pacifiers. Early on, a pacifier can develop some of the muscles, but when they get at around 5 months and they kind of coo and they get they're into more like the sucking phase, you want to start thinking about walking away from the pacifier.
I
Now,
have a story there too. Can I do a quick one?
that's sure. This episode, I think we're gonna go till we're
I'm
gonna go till we
sorry.
go. No,
Well,
I love it. I love
because
it.
my daughter's 12 and she's got the Cindy Brady, but she also has you can see her tongue thrusting when she talks. And with her being the firstborn and I had these situations, I relied on I called it the Mimi, and she was hooked. And we went all the way almost until her brother was born, she was 3. And it was her soothing. I did everything wrong, people.
And I would say that maybe like the thing with self-soothing and all that, there's a lot of information out there. It's something that people should look into, though. That idea.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
No, there were so many other ways to do it. So with him, I'm like, he's not getting one. And so I was like, well, maybe he needed it at the beginning. Maybe he had the tongue tie. Maybe he needed it. I don't know.
Right.
But
I mean, all of these things that none of this, this should just be public knowledge. This should be the stuff that we all know about. We don't.
yeah,
And here we are.
it should be in birthing classes and things. I don't know how much. Yeah, this will help you in the long run because of A, B, C, D, not just.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
when we're teaching, and what's exciting me is when we're teaching kids.
yeah,
I love to teach kids about all these things because they're just going to know this from an early age. They know it from their own experience. They're going
yeah,
to pass that on when they become parents.
yeah.
Look at this girl. Look at that shirt. I love that T-shirt.
I know. Kids get healthy. Yay.
Hey,
Flag. Hey, craniofacial. Is that the myofascial release?
the head.
That's
and
the
face,
treatment
basically.
we're doing
Fancy
now
though,
with
your
the
head and
boy.
facial development, and why it's important to get an early start because that development is largest within the first 4 years of life, and 90% of that development is essentially complete by 12 years of age. Obviously later in life is when we're adults, there's some things we can do. Sometimes they're, pretty serious surgical interventions. Sometimes there are things like mewing and chewing exercises and, introducing the breathing as an adult that can help. But really getting on this, like all things, early intervention is key. So let's go into some of the causes. We're going to go through different causes. Mouth breathing. Nasal obstruction is one. So it can just be things like cold, allergies, infections. What's not on the slide here, but deviated septums, polyps, like physical things that happen, right? Why do I have a chicken and egg? Is because, well, what's going on here? Are we do we mouth breathe because of obstruction, or do we have obstruction because we mouth breathe, right?
Good question.
We're gonna get into that, but plant that seed. Do we do this because we're obstructed, or are we creating obstructions because of our habit, or is it both? Is it a loop, right? So this is, and we got these chicken and egg people fighting each other, right? Oh no, it's this. But at the end of the day, we got to agree that what we can control, we really should, right? It's how we breathe. So enlarged adenoids and tonsils. So if we look at the adenoids, where they're situated, right? There's a part of the immune system, right? So the way that works is, air would normally pass through the nose. I've got some details of what happens in there, but it's pretty fascinating from the immune system standpoint. And, the adenoids, nature's so beautiful. It creates these lymphatic tissues, right? Essentially like a cluster of tissues, adenoids and tonsils that are there early on while the body's immune system is developing, respiratory system's developing. This is sort of acting as first-line defender. Usually the adenoids just shrink and disappear, right? By the time children turn 13. Adults, however, there's more and more issues with swollen adenoids in adults. Like that tissue kind of roars back and swells up. And so that inflammation can be caused by infections, allergies, other reasons. Some children are just born with abnormally large adenoids, may need to be surgically removed, okay? But we will get into like potentially how to prevent that. That would be the adenoidectomy. That's mostly sort of between 1 and 7. They start to naturally shrink around 7. And as I said earlier, they're usually gone by teens. Tonsils, right? It's like, when you're growing up, it's like, think back to when we were kids. It's like, well, everybody's got to get their wisdom teeth taken out. And, you got to get your tonsils out.
Yeah.
And you were talking about Brady, right? And I think it was sort of the Brady Bunch, tonsils.
Yep.
It's like just this sort of normal thing. Like I just pull out the tonsils, right? There's actually 4 types of tonsils, right? The tonsils usually that we're referring to, they're called the palatine tonsils for my Illinois people, palatine in the house. The palatine tonsils are those that are located in the back of the throat here, but there's actually other sets of tonsils. The other sets include the lingual tonsil, tubal tonsils, and the pharyngeal tonsils, also known as adenoids. So the adenoids actually are a form of tonsils. They're the pharyngeal tonsils. Okay. Key defensive barrier. They also may need to be removed, but maybe not. We will see. We will learn how to prevent. Because the benefits of tonsillectomy surgery, there's just been debated about this, right? And they've gotten to a point now, today's generation, it's not as routine as when we were kids. In the past, doctors might have performed tonsillectomies. The kid was bedwetting. It was convulsions, hoarseness, bronchitis, asthma. It was just like, pull the tonsils. So we've come a long way with that. That makes me think of ulcers. Back as recent as the 80s, they were removing people's stomach because they chalked up ulcers to stress. And then a doctor came along and said, nope, it's actually caused by a bacteria. And this doctor was laughed at. And just a quick aside, I'm digressing, but this doctor was laughed at. And turns out he gave himself an ulcer on purpose in front of the medical community with the H. pylori bacteria and cured it with an antibiotic and won the Nobel Prize. He was called crazy. So, when you know better, you do better, people.
When you know better, you do better. I like
When you
that.
know better, you do better. Allergies, right? And environmental allergies right now, I think is a lowball number, but the sort of most recent statistics I could find, environmental allergies affecting more than 7 million children. Some children, it's sensitivity, pollens, trees, grasses, and so, seasonal, but others, they can have, sensitivities year round, dust mites, dander, or mold. Thumb sucking, right? So we talked on the pacifier, but same sort of thing is pushing the teeth forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Teeth forward, lower teeth backward. You get this bad bite. The tongue thrust, right? So the tongue is protruding when we talked about that kind of forward. You get that narrow jaw, malocclusion. That's simply the misalignment, the malocclusion, the teeth and jaws, things aren't properly aligned. And that can make it harder to breathe through the nose. So here you go. You're not breathing. You're breathing through your mouth, creates malocclusion. Malocclusion makes it harder. You want to keep breathing through your nose. You can see this problem here. Vicious cycle.
It's all about lining up. Oh, there we go.
A tongue tie. Now, so the lingual frenulum, right? So on the bottom, but there's also, we've got one on top too. A common one. I mean, these are present at birth, right? And you could see it's going to restrict the tongue's range much. If that tongue can't get up, we saw that slide earlier. How is it going to sit on the roof of the mouth, right? And now breastfeeding, speaking, it's all building on each other, right? It may not cause problems. And in some cases, it may actually require surgery. So it's just, a tether.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is important to look at, and later in the presentation we'll talk about some evaluations and things that we can do about all of this and some action steps.
Okay, yeah, because I want to share what we've been doing. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Soft food. So we talked last episode on the nutrition part of it, where when we were looking at the work of Weston Price and in these what we'd say primitive cultures, that term. But the way we've always been, chewing harder foods, right? And we've got a lot of soft foods, and so we want to encourage, when the baby's ready for some solids, we want to encourage solids. It's kind of easy to whip up something super soft, but that chewing is helping that musculature, and if the muscles in the jaw and face aren't well developed, then the mouth's going to drop. When the muscles are strong, the mouth tends to want to close. So we're kind of, it's all builds. It all builds.
It's all connected. Yeah.
Everything is connected. So these are all of these little checkpoints that we want to look at. Dry mouth. And this is also something that we talked about last time.
Yes.
But a great thing to revisit, the decreased saliva production. Yeah. So that saliva, we know it neutralizes the acid, washes away the food debris, helps restore mineralization. When you do not have that saliva production, you're looking at gum disease, bacterial infections, tartar buildup, plaque, enamel erosion, right? The teeth become vulnerable, root canal infections, the discoloration from the enamel erosion. So lots of issues there.
Wow.
Yeah. Further into malocclusion. So again, we want to see kind of what that could look like. Again, this vicious cycle. Breathing affects bite, bite affects breathing. And, headaches, right? Migraines, facial pain. In breathing has always been something that I've brought up to all clients. Before, when I was working with mostly adults, it was something I would always bring up, nose breathing. As I started working more with children and families, I would check in on it. But the more I've learned about this, the more important I've learned to not just dismiss certain cues, the headaches. A lot of things can cause headaches. Being a nutritionist, I'm not a dentist. I'm not a teeth and mouth expert. I'm primarily a nutritionist first and foremost, but an overall health coach as well. And when you're kind of looking at these things, it's easy, that whole, like, you have the hammer, the nail thing, right? You think, oh, I'm just going to solve it nutritionally. Oh, migraines. What things do I need nutritionally to solve migraines or headaches? But this gets overlooked, right? If there's
I
bite
can see that.
dysfunction,
Yeah.
you're going to have these things come up, and it's worth looking at, the physical component of it. So just for my own sake, I've really tried to be much more mindful of this. And now I'm really checking in on the dental part of it with all my clients.
Beautiful.
There's the speech and language development. So,
Mm.
right, again, the weak facial muscles, the tongue. This is all about the tongue. See this boy there?
Mm-hmm.
There's this little boy. So especially like the lisps, that lisping, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that you can do early on that can correct this. And it actually surprised me. I mean, most speech and language, like, therapists now are pretty up to date, but there are good, better, best in any field. And I would also say this as a quick aside to those out there, that I really believe, like, the general dentist that you're going to see, if your dentist is not literate in the mouth breathing component of it, and taking on that as a very serious thing, then find another dentist.
I agree. I really think this would be a good small interjection story.
Please.
Is both the kids, we
Love it.
found this amazing holistic dentist out here, and right before, right during lockdown, really. And both the kids with ties, I went in for my son going, okay, speech development, this is an issue. It's obvious, do you guys do the frenectomies? And they go, I'd like to do 8 months of myofascial with him first to release it naturally and do everything naturally. This is just developmental. And then they kept asking me about my birth. And they're like they were shocked that I wasn't more informed because his jaw was set back. And so, like, with my daughter, has an upper lip tie and the lisp, like her tongue thrust. So she blows balloons. She does tongue strengthening exercises. She's strengthening her tongue to keep it, get the muscle work. My son with the really severe tongue tie below, he has to do the thrusts and hold it. He's got to touch the points in his mouth. He does like 5 minutes of tongue exercises a day, and it's quiet time for me. But he's getting, it's relaxing, because I'm like, just get in there and cut it. And then they're like, just let's see if it knows what to do. And then he got fitted for mouth guard. He has a horrible gag reflex. So they were like, you know what, maybe this isn't the best route, because they didn't want to traumatize him. So he's got to do we're in the middle of this series of the exercises. So I'll let you know how it goes. But I wanted to let you know,
this.
Our dentist said this.
This is so great. And what you said they were shocked.
Yes. It was floored that I got released from the hospital without this taken care of. This
should just be part of dentistry, because when you're going for checkups, right, who is seeing your child's mouth with the frequency and should have the ability, with the attention to detail, to be able to notice these things, be able to ask you these right questions.
Yeah.
That should be on the general intake form when you're going to
see my gosh. Yeah, we found this great little old man with old equipment. He does ozone therapy and everything for your teeth. But before that, we went, because I have a fear, until this guy, a fear of dentists. So I took them to the fairy place with the fairy dentist ladies and TV screens everywhere. And look at the shiny ball. Not one of them said, did you know your daughter's lip tie and your son? That's why they're getting cavities and decay, and none of them. They just wanted to pull things. And I found this guy. We saved all the teeth. We saved all the teeth, even a root canal. They said my daughter needed a root canal. This man saved it. And it was an adult tooth. And I'm like, I can't believe that chop shop wanted me to spend everything and torture my kids. The new guy's like, we got to save your teeth and let's get your jaw work fixed.
Wow. I
so
love it.
Big difference of what you can find out there.
This is huge. This would be the similar thing as, imagine, somebody's still saying, well, no, stress causes the ulcer. It's not caused by, it's that same sort of thinking. Oh, we've always done it this way, or that's rubbish. Oh, that's just kind of hippie, whatever. It's like, no, this is, and when you really think about it, I mean, this thought got into my head at an early age of like, why do we have teeth that aren't supposed to come in?
Yeah, like your wisdom.
That thing, like with the wisdom teeth, like these are questions that even as a young child I was asking in my head of like, oh, that's just the way it is.
Oh yeah.
Really?
They sound like
That
such smart
makes
teeth.
no sense.
Yeah.
Really.
Doesn't make sense.
Interesting. So here, let's get into some detail here. So this is when I said earlier about the nasal cavity and all these great things. So if you want to see this slide in the upper left corner here, okay, see where that nasal cavity is. Now look at the slide below, all right? Now if we see like these pathogens and bugs, right, kind of making their way in through the mouth, those purple sections, that top purple is your adenoid, below there is your palatine tonsil. If you actually look at what's supposed to happen in the nasal cavity, and the green on top is you've got this first line of defense where nitric oxide, you see these blue clouds here. Nitric oxide is an antiviral gas. During the C-19 situation, I was recommending everybody, please breathe through your nose. And papers were coming out talking about the impact of nasal breathing and nitric oxide and its ability to knock down pathogens and viruses. So you've got this like beautiful first line of defense here, right? What's also happening in the nose, there's warming of the air, humidifying, filtration, right? The little hairs in the nose. It's just a natural place. The nose is meant to breathe. The mouth is meant to eat and speak, right? The nose is breathe and smell. And all of that filtration that occurs. So by the time it hits the point of the adenoid and tonsils, a lot of the dirty work has been done. Now, if you conversely go to taking that in through the mouth, now what's happening is that air has not been humidified. It's cold, it's dry. The pathogens are coming in full steam. The adenoids and tonsils are like, what? Really? Okay, we had a little break there. Where am I picking up?
Well, the particles coming in dry.
Yeah. Okay. So when we're getting that, when that air is coming through the mouth, cold and dry and uninterrupted, and that is hitting the adenoids and tonsils like full force, you've got a problem there. You have a really big problem because all of that dirty work was supposed to happen in the nose, right? So here's where we get to the point I made earlier is that blocking, okay? Are we mouth breathing because there's a block? Or do we have blocks now because of mouth breathing? Because as we're doing this and we're inflaming the back of the throat, the adenoids and tonsils, now we're going to create a worse situation. And what happens? We say, I just can't breathe through Lawrence, I can't breathe through my nose. Well, if you can't breathe through your nose, you must. And we just have to get to the bottom of it, right? Because those adenoids and tonsils are working harder. That enlargement can occur, and now you have higher risks of infections. It just creates a downstream effect, right? And now we're also demanding more of the respiratory system, and all of this stuff kind of compounds on each other. So the immune system, and that could be also a whole other episode of the downstream effects of immunity. But immunity starts at the gatekeepers, right? Protect at all costs. You want to protect your home, you put locks on the doors and the windows, any entry points, right? Common sense. Here you are.
Wow.
When we look at nasal filtration, right? The nose filters pathogens, right? The hairs inside the nose, they're trapping, right? So there's mucus and they're trapping and filtering. So the dust, the pollen, that mucus contains antibodies, right? So that helps to destroy bacteria and viruses. So you're missing out on all of this, right? It's aligned with the immune cells, the white blood cells, and those are the kind of first line of defense. They help to identify and destroy those pathogens. And the nitric oxide, like I said, it's antimicrobial, kills bacteria and viruses. Amazing, guys. Sleep apnea,
Mm.
okay? Sleep apnea characterized by interrupted breathing during sleep. And so mouth breathing is very inefficient. You were mentioning earlier, like you feel like you're just getting a lot of air. It's like, oh, it's a bigger hole. I must be getting more air in. It's just when you actually think of where that air needs to go and how that comes in, mouth breathing is incredibly inefficient. Think of it like, you've got to just breathe much more often through the mouth. Think about like rowing a boat. If you're like paddling like many times, you can move that boat along. But breathing should be like smooth and long paddles. When you're rowing a boat, you can move fast and far. These kind of long strokes. We're exerting a lot. So what happens is the brain starts to sense oxygen's getting low because it's so inefficient to breathe through our mouth. So that signal starts to interrupt the sleep pattern, jolt you through the night, wake up, get a puff, right? Keep doing that. And this is a huge problem. So then this leads to daytime sleepiness, poor concentration, behavior. The kids acting out. They're not focusing at school. What's going on? Oh, well, again, the nutritionist side of me, well, we could do this. Yes, we can. But, let's check in. What's going on here? Because this can really lead to a lot of issues, cardiovascular, other health problems later in life. Obviously for adults, we've got a lot of adults, wearing the CPAP machines at night. I was first, introduced with solutions to sleep apnea with Buteyko breathing, which is something that, a guy named Buteyko, a Russian doctor, I think he was like in the 50s, 60s, he noticed that when people were dying, they were gasping and kind of over-breathing, hyperventilating, over-breathing. And he developed a system called the Buteyko method. Highly encourage everybody out there to look into Buteyko, whether you have sleep apnea, asthma, allergies. It centers around nasal breathing. There's so many different camps of breath work. Again, we go into like this idea of default breathing versus breathing strategies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other thing, like go-to strategies. If strategies to unblock your nose, strategies to bring down anxieties. Sometimes over-breathing can be used acutely to purposely increase stress so that when you're done doing the exercise, you get a kind of a rebound calming effect. So it's fascinating.
Do you like the Iceman?
Yes, Wim Hof. So that Wim Hof method is an exercise to stimulate norepinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol on purpose, an acute stressor to that's asking the body then to fight back, and drive back into the parasympathetic nervous system. So you get that feeling of calm. You splash your face with cold water, the Iceman is even cold, the shiver effect, but then you feel really good after, right? So we're not always, you can't always be like, oh God, right. But we're actually doing that. Right. Wow. But if you think about it, that kind of breathing through the mouth is hitting the top part of the lung. If we're always hitting the top part of the lung, we're always in fight or flight. It's the foot's on the gas all the time. We want good management of the gas and the brake pedal. So, we don't want to be sitting on the top of our lungs. We want the lower lobe of the lungs. That's where the money is. And that ties in, as I've said before, to the parasympathetic, to the digestive system. Less stress, rest, digest. Just remember that. Less stress, rest, digest. So you got a child that's got like problems with their tummy. They get tummy aches for eating. Certainly look at what kind of food's going on, but we also want to do some breath work before they eat. Get them to eat with their mouth closed. Good old-fashioned manners. Don't be like Lawrence living with Heidi.
My son does that. Drives the giant nuts.
Yeah. So checking in on these kind of things. Here it is, right? Anxiety. Oh, so now we're getting this breathlessness, panic, stress, irritability, social behavior, academics. So here's your vicious cycle again. The poor sleep makes you more irritable. You're more irritable. You're more prone to panic and stress. You're more panic and stress today. You get it keeps going. Stop it. Look at this poor kid. Help. Okay, so what do we do, right? So at home, what can the parents do? What could they ask of the healthcare providers and practitioners and professionals in our life? So you want to look for those physical signs, right? So here's your short checklist. Want to look for that consistently open mouth. Check in. Are your mouth dry? Look at the lips, right? Look at the forward head posture. Okay. Watch them while they're sleeping. Okay. And then check in, right? The allergies, congestion, structural issues, the deviated septum, the polyps, what's going on here? And a qualified dentist, as we were saying, right? A qualified dentist that is aware of what I am not a dentist, but I think what I presented today, if at a bare minimum your dentist doesn't know this, right?
You need a new dentist then.
Right. And we see here this boy, like a sleep study, could be of some value, right? Some allergy testing, you want to kind of get a baseline of what might be going on to address that. And then we kind of want to solve that, right? And here's a quick checklist when we're getting into myofunctional disorder. So it's sort of a timeline. Everybody can, screenshot this out there. So early on,
That's great.
the infant to 3 years old, there might be difficulty nursing, poor latching, right? There might be some GERD, reflux, open mouth. There's a difficulty transitioning to solids. There's some gagging going on. They might be choking. They might be vomiting. Above 3, sort of younger children. The tongue thrust, reverse swallow, right? So swallowing should be relaxed. Swallowing, the tongue makes a wave backward, right? And a good swallow is like the mouth is relaxed and there's kind of a wave backward. The reverse swallow is defined by that forward, right? The thumb sucking, the pacifier use, all of this, right? Drooling, all of these things impaired speech. And then in adolescence, same sort of things. If they've had orthodontics and they've relapsed, hey, wait, he's had his braces off for a couple of years and like, this is what's coming back here. Okay. We've got an issue. Any kind of jaw pain, articulation, their speech. Struggling with speech, problems with chewing food, all of these things, the sleep, everything we've mentioned, but checking in on these. So myofunctional therapy. Here we go, right? And it just aims to improve the oral function, speech, and breath patterns. And so we want to get a comprehensive evaluation. They identify the habits, personalize it, right? Follow-up assessments. When you can find good practitioners, I mean, it is just unbelievable what is possible. And also when they know how to work with kids, what's actually interesting about this, you think like, man, how am I going to get my kid to do this? But there's a lot of clever games, right? Hug the gummy bear. You can work with a gummy bear to get that kind of, tongue in the right position. Just hold the gummy bear, there's all these like cute little exercises you could do. And it's really great to be participating with your kid doing these. It's just really going to be helpful. Then they don't feel kind of isolated and like do it along with them. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's probably good for you too. Mouth taping, right? So we talked about the mouth taping and pay attention to this design of the mouth tape, right? So we're going to get into this particular design, but all of these benefits, straightforward. Keep the mouth closed at night. Now, this form of mouth tape can also be applied while they're watching TV, video games during the day, because it just encourages. And if they want to sip water, if they want to talk, they still can. But they're going to get a slight tug, and it just kind of encourages them to keep the mouth closed, right? You can use it almost like as a habit trainer, okay? I would usually recommend this to ages 3 and up. You can, and it is not an end-all be-all. What I want to also emphasize is that mouth taping can be a big part of this, right? But don't just skip the steps of the evaluation, right?
It's a whole package.
Go to mouth tape right away. I'm a huge fan no matter what, but don't think that's the end-all be-all, because if there are physical problems that need attention or some underlying things, mouth tape's just going to be temporary. So it's a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And I got my little disclaimer for all you peeps out there. It's, under the guidance of a healthcare professional. Take that as you will. I'm just going to straight up shill for this company, myotape.com. If you go to myotape.com, you can pick up these the style of mouth tape. And on the right here, you see all these fun exercises that they have on there just for free. The magic nose unblocking exercise. Would you like to know?
Yes.
Would you like to know the quick one? So this is like a real fast one I can share. So if you, as an adult, or if you want to help your child unblock their nose, okay. So it's a pretty easy procedure, all right? So what we want to do, get comfortable, sit upright, sit in a chair, sit upright. All right, Heidi, you're going to do it. All right.
Yeah.
You want to close your mouth, okay? Now you want to take keep your mouth closed, take a small breath in through your nose. Okay, out through your nose. Now pinch your nose shut with your finger. Okay, now I want you to start to nod your head up and down. I'll hold your breath. Nod up and down, up and down. Now when your maximum breath hold, is reached. Okay, so just keep going until you feel like, I don't want to do this anymore. You can release and breathe calm. Your nose will be much more open. You'll notice it works amazing.
Wait a second. Yeah. What did that stretch out?
Bingo. Yeah. It is amazing. It is an incredible technique. And kids, when you get kids, all right, everybody, it's fun. It could be fun. This stuff does not have to be boring at all. So the dolphin breathing, the tortoise breathing, the racehorse, right? So all these like really fun. I love this as a resource to share.
They're basically saying you don't just buy like look at these exercises you can try too. I like that they did
that. Found out about this through Patrick McCohen. He's an Irishman who talks about mouth breathing. He talks like this. But him and James Nestor, Patrick McEwen and James Nestor are sort of the two heavy hitters when it comes to breathing. So there's so much free material out there, guys, that you can do a lot at home, or at least be informed of know what to ask for. That's a big part of this.
And what red flags to look for.
Correct.
If you have practitioners that don't talk about these things.
Correct. And so overall here, holistic approach, right? We want to look at all of this coming together, the diet, hydration, stress management, breathing, it all comes together. When we're thinking about dental health, well, dental health leads downstream to overall health and emotional health and school performances and social emotional, all of these things. Okay. So in summary, final note, breathe through your nose. Look at these two, mouth closed. Happy kiddos. So that's what I got. Did I stick the landing? We're coming up.
That was fabulous. Look at you. Yeah, before time up.
Like, how can I get this in an hour? But
that was just so amazing. I want to share too, to any parents who have had similar journeys as mine, please get rid of any parent shame or guilt you have for not knowing any better at that time. Like I really let it go. Yeah. I really had to dig deep and, have compassion for myself because I didn't know these tools or have all these things. So sure, things could have been prevented, but I'm working with what I have now. And what I have now is giving them relief. And I'm so glad my instinct took me away from that old dental of, well, let's just pull them all out. And here's a root canal and all these things. And I got them to heal their teeth. You want your teeth. You need your teeth. Absolutely. And the dental health in general, just knowing the nasal breathing, it kind of gives a little like, okay, we can work on that. Empower. There's our empowerment word again. It definitely not only empowers the kid, but empowers you as a family and a parent to go, I can do this. We've got the skills to do this now. And we can work on it.
You know how to breathe. I mean, what is more fundamental than breathing? And I think it's the reason that it gets overlooked so often is because it's just happening involuntarily. So we tend to not be intentional about it. Mm-hmm. But when we can be intentional about it, something I didn't, I'm not sure if I touched on during the presentation was even while you're walking or exercising, oddly enough, my brother who got into marathons and this years ago, he was instinctively keeping his mouth closed. He just liked that better. And I was fascinated with that because that's not my natural impulse and not the impulse of many. But what I noticed, like my brother improved dramatically pretty quickly with his exercise performance. There is some interesting research on nose breathing while exercising, even burning more body fat. I think it was a study out of Texas done years ago. But so to be able to not only breathe through your nose at rest, but challenge yourself to do it through some exertion, it can be incredible. Obviously, there's going to be times that, we're going to need to kind of just go. It's just unavoidable, sucking eggs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It can be unavoidable. But for the most part, you could push that threshold. What I would say here, Heidi, is my slides for today. Maybe we could, I could provide the PDF to you. And if you wanted to maybe do a download link, or maybe we could share it to people, that might be something. If you're open to that, I can get that to you.
That's really kind of you, because that's a lot of work that you put into that. And
well, it's worth it. Look, guys, it's everyone.
This
is one of those things where, we just got to get the word out there. I don't mind. Like, this is each one of those pieces to it is its own thing as well. You go into sleep apnea, anxiety, all of these things. If you don't look at it holistically, you're potentially leaving money on the table. And so let's be comprehensive about it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea of Kids Get Healthy, just to kind of pitch my own thing, is that it's not about kids losing weight, or it's not about kids eat perfect. It's a healthy breathing, food, exercise, communication, the psychology, all of this matters. And so my goal is to make this bigger than me eventually. So that's my
big segue into a little
bit of segue.
I know, and I want to thank you for reminding me of the posture, because that's my downfall. I've always been I'm doing it now. I do it now because I'm Jimmy rigged over here, and I have this tiny little stool because I like to sit on my knees. I'm usually on my knees, but I'm like this, and then my mouth opens. I start breathing like that. It's just constantly reminding me.
It's top down, but also bottom up. So sometimes the feet, it's not even mentioned, but if the feet are wrong, it sets that up where the head has to do certain things to compensate. A lot of things are just compensatory. Yeah. This happens here. Another part of the body has to do this there to compensate, creates these imbalances, and those patterns get kind of locked in and frozen. The muscles have to start doing what they do to hold that, and now you're frozen and locked into this forward head posture.
That's it.
So forward head posture can create problems downstream, but problems at the feet level, the hips. I got one leg longer than the other, my right leg, so my right hip is higher, right?
That messes up with the rest. Yeah.
Everything gets thrown off.
Cranial chiropractor. Like, you got to get into that
cranial sacral therapy, where they're kind of holding your head. I've gone through some of those sessions.
I know, they're really
absolutely blown away, because I honest to God was like, this is a little kind of like, come on, really? Wow. I ended up coming out of there really impressed, but so I hope this was helpful, and I think we'll probably knock out maybe another in the sort of dental series, perhaps maybe a third episode of something we can.
I would love to. I'd love to get your opinion too on, because I have a recurring gum issue right here. So I went recently and looked at what are those teeth? What are they connected to? And sure enough, it's two organs that I'm constantly told by other healer friends or other people, like, this thing's funky, and those are the teeth I'm having trouble with.
Yeah, that is something I'm fascinated with.
I'm going to double hit it.
Yeah, that is like a very niche lane that I would say is like not an area, but I would love to dive in. I will happily dive into some of that, but
just as a part of it. But we got more to talk about. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. I know it was originally Saturdays, but I do love our Sundays, because I know as a kid I loved my Saturday and Sunday cartoons. So this is the new informative.
We're coming in on the weekend. Saturday, Sunday, whatever.
Yeah.
Just keep them coming.
Kickstart your week healthy and well. Just a reminder, everyone, kidsgethealthy.com. And you can find Lawrence at kidsgethealthy.com. And I'm
Lawrence
so
at.
impressed. I love your beautiful trailer for your new channel. And we're going to head out with that. And so peace out, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And I got to find it really quick right here. Here we go. You all have a beautiful day. Thank you, Lawrence, so much.
Thank you, Heidi. This was so much fun. Thank you.